Henry II dies shortly afterwards, depressed over the betrayal of his son, essentially a broken man. This happens in July 1189. Richard is then crowned king at Westminster Abbey in September, the first of only 2 known visits to England made during his reign. He was, in actuality, a French king, and Richard never takes the time to learn the English language. The Lionheart, upon his ascension to the English throne, Richard attempts to finance his participation in the Third Crusade to retake Jerusalem that had fallen to the Muslim armies of Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. This happens in 1187 AD. The overriding need for cash forces King Richard to be inventive in the search for revenue. His machinery of government becomes more complex and ingenious, and he pushes the traditional rights of the king to the limit, to extremes, giving himself godlike supreme powers. He becomes known as the Liege Lord. He sells perpetual land grants to both individuals and communities, and also sells fiscal and jurisdictional privileges and offices to the highest bidder. With cash in hand, Richard becomes content to delegate the governance of England to others, and takes little interest in England other than as a source of future revenue for his military adventures. The Lionheart then joins the French armies under Philip II Augustus at Messina in Sicily, where tensions quickly surface between Richard and King Tancred of Sicily over the dowry of Richard's sister Joan, the Dowager Queen. Fighting erupts among the Crusader Knights and the citizens of Messina. The Knights have treated the townsfolk with little or no respect, and basically the Crusader Knights loot and pillage the town for supplies. Richard takes advantage of the situation and seizes control of the city of Messina. Hostility soon simmers between King Richard and King Philip, who are sometimes lovers and allies, but always rivals for power. Richard has repudiated his betrothal to Lady Alice, Philip's sister, in order to marry Berengaria of Navarre. Navarre was a kingdom in northern Spain. Berengaria's father has promised to provide massive amounts of grain, cattle, and timber for the Crusaders. And the wedding takes place. Now, the politically expedient wedding takes place in Cyprus. Now, according to legend, Richard does not even show up to the wedding, but sends his mighty sword in his place. This is an ancient but legally binding custom or tradition of the nobility, a royal prerogative that keeps Richard from actually having to sleep with Berengaria on the wedding night. The king of Cyprus, King Isaac, then tries to detain Berengaria and Joan, who's actually her chaperone, in order to collect a hefty ransom. Well, Richard's small army then overwhelms Cyprus, and unexpectedly, the Lionheart gets reinforcements with the arrival of Guy of Lusignan, the former king of Jerusalem, who was evicted by Saladin from his throne in the Holy Land. Guy actually has a rival for the Jerusalem throne, Conrad of Montserrat. And Guy appeals to Richard for the Lionheart's backing and support. However, Philip II Augustus supports Conrad. Now, the Knights Templar become allied with King Richard, making the alignment of the Knights Templars' rivals, the Hospitaller Knights, well, they side with King Philip and Conrad. Now, these power struggles between the Crusaders will eventually diminish much of what they managed to achieve via force of arms in the Holy Land. Richard then proceeds to Acre, arriving in June, to the pageantry, glory, and acclaim that he craves. The Holy Roman Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa had already mounted the largest Crusader army ever, but Frederick Barbarossa drowns accidentally while trying to cross a river in Sicilia. Barbarossa falls into the waters in full body armor and quickly drowns. So the Germans, the Teutonic Knights, are in disarray. Now, King Philip had also arrived before King Richard, bringing very sophisticated siege equipment and fresh horses. Richard is, in fact, the new macho leader of the Crusader Knights. Richard appeals to the fractious Crusader Knights more than does the effeminate King Philip, and the Lionheart quickly leads a successful assault on Acre, which had been under siege for almost 2 years. Richard and Philip, well, their new weapons of mass destruction, break Acre's resistance, and the formidable Egyptian fleet is destroyed by the Italian naval forces, and the city of Acre falls in July 1191. Richard, in victory, is now left to command the Crusader forces alone. King Philip II Augustus has little appetite for battle in the Holy Land and is far more interested in King Richard's territorial possessions in France. The French king will soon join Richard's brother, Prince John. They will become allies against the Lionheart, just as Philip Augustus had done before with Richard against Richard's father, King Henry II. After Acre's surrender, Richard, he infamously massacres 3,000 Muslim prisoners, men, women, and children, a most un-Christian-like action. Now, the repercussions of this horrible massacre, this brutal act, will be felt all over the Holy Land, as many Christian prisoners are accorded the same treatment. And this stiffens the Muslims' resolve to resist King Richard's advance. But the Lionheart still manages to defeat Saladin's forces at Arsuf, giving the Lionheart control of Jaffa. Now, Saladin the Great, like his rival and enemy, King Richard, becomes the stuff of legend that is, both celebrated and embellished over the centuries. Saladin, before the arrival of King Richard, had moved against the Crusaders in a swift and devastating military campaign, and captures virtually all the territory in the Levant, including Jerusalem. Saladin sweeps the region, with the exception of Antioch and Tripoli. Saladin is not a reckless fighter, and led his troops personally into battle. He was a fierce and harsh military commander, but he was always kind-hearted to those he had defeated, and offered his enemies generous terms, seldom, if ever, exacting retribution for past wrongs. All right, so Richard then moves on Jerusalem itself, but fierce dissension and fundamental differences with the Crusader Knights and the rulers of the Latin Christian kingdoms in the Holy Land undercut the Lionheart's military efforts. Richard is also receiving dire reports of Philip and John's activities, and the Lionheart knows that he must soon return to his own lands. So Richard alternately launches military forays and negotiations with Saladin. Richard even offers his sister Joan in marriage to Saladin's brother, Al-Adil, in order to attain peace. Joan refuses to convert to Islam, so Al-Adil respectively declines the offer of marriage. Twice, King Richard was on the verge of storming Jerusalem, but decided to listen to the advice of his counselors, who advised the Lionheart against sacking of Jerusalem. Richard must now return home and confront the traitorous and ambitious Prince John and King Philip II Augustus. So he arranges a 5-year truce with Saladin. Now, the treaty leaves Jerusalem under Muslim control, but permits Christian pilgrims access to the city, as long as they carry no weapons beyond Jerusalem's gate. The truce also reestablishes the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, which had been nearly extinguished by Saladin. The new kingdom, the Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, will now have its capital, its seat in Acre. The Lionheart, disguised as a Templar knight, then attempts to make his way back to his own lands. He travels on foot after being shipwrecked in the Adriatic Sea. He is then captured in Austria by Duke Leopold. Leopold had been humiliated by Richard's troops at Acre. They goofed on him. So Duke Leopold turns Richard over to the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry VI, who is the son of Frederick I Barbarossa, who, remember, drowned in the Holy Land. Richard had supported Henry VI's cousin, Henry the Lion. There's an awful lot of Henrys here. Henry the Lion was the ruler of Bavaria and Saxony, the rival of Henry VI for the Holy Roman Empire's throne. So the new Holy Roman Emperor, Henry VI, wants revenge against Richard. Now, let's get a little bit into the Holy Roman Empire, which was neither holy nor Roman. It really should have been called the Western Christian Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was basically started by Charlemagne and the Franks. But either way, it lasted for nearly 1,000 years and played an instrumental role in the development of Western Europe, exercising considerable power and influence. Now, the new Holy Roman Emperor only frees his captive Richard the Lionheart after he receives down payment of a huge ransom and the symbolic surrender of Richard's lands, which were then returned to Richard as a vassal state or fiefdom of the Holy Roman Empire and Henry VI. Now, in 1197, King Richard eventually gets his revenge against, Emperor Henry. When Henry alienates the church by annexing the kingdom of Sicily, and the Holy Roman Emperor tries to create an extension of his own empire in Italy near the Papal States, with Sicily as its power base. Well, the Lionheart becomes allies with Pope Innocent III, and they combine their forces, the Papal armies and the English army, and attack the Holy Roman Empire. This foments a 15-year civil war in Germany. So Richard gets his revenge in 1197. Now, after the down payment of the ransom arrives, Richard is now free and no longer a prisoner. So he soon arrives in England and is then crowned a second time. This is in order to assert his royal rights, forcing the supporters of his brother John to submit to the Lionheart's authority. King Richard again needs to